Welcome to the Business Leader Spotlight. The Business Leader Spotlight is bringing attention to those in our community making a difference in business. It is also an opportunity to identify the skills they have learned and applied to get where they are. And now, let us go into this week's interview.
Welcome to the Business Leader Spotlight. This week we have with us the co-founder of Manager Tools, Mark Horstman. Hello, Mark. How are you doing today?
Good, Michael. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for joining us on the show today. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Grew up in Los Angeles, one of four sons. Went to the U.S. Military Academy, go Army, beat Navy. 5 years in the Army. Went to work at Procter & Gamble, sold toothpaste. Couple of years as a recruiter, and for the last 27, 28 years, I have been a management consultant. Started my own firm many years ago, sold that 15 years ago, and for the last 15 years, my business partner, Michael Ozan, and I, a classmate from West Point and close friend, served together in the Army as well, have been doing Manager Tools, which is, I think, still the #1 business podcast in the world.
Wow, that's great. You've got quite the career of, from the, joining the Army and then going to Procter & Gamble and then going into business yourself. And for the last 15 years, and because this is the 15th year of Manager Tools, do you mind sharing a little bit of the history about how you guys put the idea together?
Yeah, it's funny. And I live in California, just south of Silicon Valley, and there's this thing in Silicon Valley called the creation myth. Okay. Because these startups end up telling stories about what actually happened, and it's not really what actually happened. In our case, it's not a creation myth. It's a true story. I had sold my company, and during that time, Mike and I were still close friends, and he had been a client for a number of years when he was an executive at MCI, and I really didn't want to work anymore. And Mike said to me, if you, we had been talking about doing something together, but nothing had really worked out. Right. And he says, if you retire, nobody's going to get to hear your stuff from you. And so, okay, fine. Let's look at stuff. And he got an iPod in Christmas 2004 and called me one day and said, I've got it. I know what we're going to do. We're going to do podcasts. And I said, okay, well, what's a podcast? Because I literally didn't know. At that time, I didn't have an iPod. I'm not Mr. Tech Future guy. Okay. And in January of 2005, he sent me a long email about and a MS project plan of all the things we needed to do to start a podcast. And I joked with him. He's much more detail conscious than I am. I said, we're not going to spend 6 months doing this. We're going to go down to Best Buy. We're going to buy a microphone. We're going to plug it into the side of your laptop, and we're going to talk into it and see whether or not we don't sound like fools. And sure enough, turned out it was good. And now, of course, we then spent the next 6 months getting our ducks in a row, but right. Our first podcast went out called Solution to a Stalled Technical Career. And in a great stroke of good fortune, no question, Michael, we've been smiled upon by the gods. The day after we launched our podcast, Apple announced support for podcasts in iTunes. And because we were early, and because there were some people at Apple whom we have since met who were big fans of the podcast, we've got over 250 million downloads now, which maybe not a big deal for Serial or something, or some tech cast, maybe Twit or something like that. But for management, which may be the boringest, uncoolest thing in the world, we're still surprised by the growth.
Oh, no, I can imagine just, 250 million, no matter how you say that number is large.
It's a nice number. Yeah, it is. Yeah.
So I've been a personally, I've been following you guys not quite 15 years, probably about 12 to 13 years. And
Okay, good.
some of my favorite guidance is about the Management Trinity. Could you share a little bit about the Trinity and share with the audience
Sure.
what that is?
Well, first, let me say that if you're listening and you're wondering how a cast about management could have 250 million downloads, I will tell you the one thing that you'll notice when you listen to our cast is Mike and I are attempting to do, and by the way, we have 2 casts, Manager Tools and Career Tools. The first one is for managers, specifically around managerial problems. Anybody could listen to Career Tools, including managers, but if you're not a manager, you may want to listen to Manager Tools, but only if you want to become a manager. Probably the single biggest difference is that all of our guidance, all of our podcasts recommend things you should do, not ways you should think, not ideas you should have, not feelings you should elicit in your people, like being courageous or being energetic or being empathetic, or even worse, being empathic, heaven forbid. We actually have specific actionable guidance, and I encourage anybody to listen to any of our casts and not recognize that we'll tell you we'll give you a situation and we'll tell you exactly what to do and what to say, and in many cases, not all, but in the vast majority of cases, we actually have data, which I gathered during my previous ownership, my previous firm. And so that's the thing that generally causes people to stay. Mike and I wanted to solve the problem that we had when we were young managers, even in the Army, Michael, and even at Procter & Gamble, which, by the way, the reason I went to Procter & Gamble was I had read in a couple of different places it was considered the West Point of corporate America. So I figured, okay, I can't look bad on a resume, 2 West Points. As it turned out, I mean, neither the Army nor Procter & Gamble taught me how to manage people. I mean, leadership, yeah, okay, some of that, which is much more about character, I think. But being a manager, definitely not.
Okay.
And so that's essentially what Manager Tools is all about. Now, the Management Trinity. People don't know this, but there's a lot of science done by PhDs about the very boring subject about management, presenting in a very boring way so that no one has ever heard about it, regarding what makes managers effective and not. Most people believe that what they read in the newspaper or what they hear on a popular book is what management is. That's actually generally not true. The vast majority of management guidance is not good. What they're trying to do is sell books, and they're trying to sell books to CEOs, and they're trying to sell books to CEOs in order to get the CEO to hire them as a consultant to make millions of dollars, which is all fine and good, and it's a good business model because apparently CEOs are willing to do it. But the science on management, and both Mike and I are mechanical engineers from school, we're a little bit more dot the I and cross the T than, we like data. We really do like data. And we have a saying internally in the company, the plural of anecdote is not data. And most people just have anecdotes about management. So the Management Trinity is not mine specifically. I just learned about it when I started my company and said, okay, I'm going to help managers get better so I don't have to go through what I went through. And what you discover is there are 2 fundamental responsibilities of every manager. And by the way, I'm not making this up. This isn't Manager Tools. This is Management Science 101. Right. The 2 things you're supposed to do as a manager is get results, whatever your boss or your organization says those things are, and retain your people. You have to achieve the goals of the organization, and you have to do it in a sustainable way.
Yes.
Now, that's just, and this is an inevitable result of organizational theory and organizations serving society and so on. Well, anybody who's smart, and most people are, will say, okay, if that's the 2 responsibilities I have, what should I do? Does management science tell me anything about that? Oh, it does. It does. And it has for years, and nobody knows. There are about 15 behaviors. Really, there are 15 behaviors that can make a measurable impact in controlled studies. One manager doing one thing, another manager doing another for a period of time. There are about 15 managerial behaviors that make up 97% of your ability to achieve results and retention in the average organization. Not saying there aren't organizations that are different. 15. But as top 10 lists or 15 lists often are, they're graded, and the top 4 behaviors in that list represent 75% of that 97%.
Oh, wow.
So what you would say to yourself is, well, wait a minute. I mean, I can try to do 1,000 different things. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. Maybe my gut tells me it will. I don't know, whatever. Or you could just pay attention to decades of research and say, these 4 behaviors are the biggest levers you hand. It's like Archimedes, he said, give me a lever and a place in which to stand and I shall, or Fulcrum, give me a place to stand and I shall move the earth. It's like, dude, you can spend all you want going over there trying to be empathetic, but there's no evidence historically that being empathetic, not that, look, I want everybody to be respectful of other people's feelings, but there's no evidence that as a general rule across the board that is a managerial behavior that will make a difference. And the Management Trinity are the top 4 behaviors. And I promise you it's not a marketing trick. I'll explain. Those 4 behaviors are know your people. The single most important thing managers can do that will repeatedly lead to higher results and higher retention is to build a trusting relationship with her directs. Right. There's just no question about it. Take it from me. I mean, Michael, I am not a naturally easy to like person. I'm an engineer. I am direct. I am no nonsense. If you ask me my opinion and then you get upset when I give it to you, I find that to be entirely your problem. My people behaviors are all learned because I learned a long time ago, Horstman's first law, it's all about people. But it doesn't come naturally to me. Right. But if you want to be successful, you shouldn't assume that every role in the world is built for your natural skills and talents. They're not. And so in my case, the fact that I learned scientifically by reading and understanding management science doctrine, know your people is the simplest thing you can do. If you really want to be efficient as a manager, spending time with your people on a regular basis is the single most powerful, efficient use of your time as a manager. The higher your trust, the easier everything gets, the less friction, the less tension, less drama, the less conflict you'll have, the more likely people will be able to achieve things more quickly and so on. So number 1 is know your people. Number 2 is talk about performance. The very best managers in the world are unstinting, and they tell people, this is what I think. You did this good and this good. You didn't do this good. Can you do this better? And so on. Everyone says all the time, I wish my boss would give me more info about how I'm doing. And then they turn around right at the same time and say, oh, but me and my people know exactly where they stand. And I say, well, I just talked to them. They actually said, no, they don't. And you need to tell your people. Yes. And to tell you the truth, your CEO does not care that you're uncomfortable. We don't care. It's not our job to make you comfortable. It's not our job to do your job. If you're a manager, you're obligated as a function of the way the organization works and how the organization serves society to tell your people how they're doing, even if you believe there could be some hurt feelings. Now, believe me, don't get me wrong. I'm not suggesting that you can be gruff or rude or disrespectful. In fact, we have data which show those things don't work. But talk about, or know your people, talk about performance, ask for more, and push work down. These are the 4 biggest behaviors. Now, we call it the Management Trinity because it's only the first 3, know your people, talk about performance, and ask for more, that are specifically related to you and your team's performance. But in a larger organization, you also have some behaviors that are asked of a manager that affect the overall organization's, the corporate performance, if you will, and that is push work down, because pushing work down is more efficient. If Michael, if you're my boss and both you and I can do a task, I'm the one that the organizational theory says, and I've seen this over and over again to be true, I'm the one that should be doing it. If I report to you and both of us can do a job, I'm the one that should be doing it. And don't take this the wrong way, guys. I'm cheaper. And there are things that you can do that I can't do. And so I should do it, and that would free you up for the time that you would have spent on that to do something that can lead or change or grow the organization. So the Management Trinity, all we did was take those top 4 behaviors, which are literally the ball game. And we said, okay, and this comes from my previous company, I started looking for tools that would help managers achieve knowing your people, talking about performance, ask for more, and push work down. And for about 20 years, I tested various models of things that managers would do, not what they would think, not what they would feel, not what they would believe, not what they would dream about, but what they would actually do. And the reason the company is called Manager Tools is we are essentially recommending in the podcast and in paid for public conferences and client work and licensing our work and so on, we are essentially recommending tools that will help managers do their job. For know your people, it is one-on-ones. We believe, at least a little bit, that we're responsible for some of the resurgence of one-on-ones as a really useful tool for managers. Our feedback model is for talking about performance. Our coaching model is for asking for more, and our delegation model is for pushing work down. You don't need our tools to achieve greatness as a manager, but you do need to master your own tools for those 4 big behaviors. If you're really busy and you feel yourself really inefficient and ineffective, it's probably because you're working on the wrong tools. You know, there's an old saying about the guy who lost his keys, and a policeman finds him on the street looking for something, and he says, he's looking underneath the street light for something. Policeman says, "Is this where you lost him?" He said, "No, I lost him over there, but the light is good here."
Yes.
There are a lot of managers who do what comes naturally to them, and we hope the whole point of Manager Tools, in part, is to help managers realize it doesn't matter. You don't get paid to do what you want to do. You don't get paid to be comfortable. You get paid to do what's effective for the organization, and science has pretty well determined that. And the great thing about it is it's not hard. It's managing people doesn't have to be tension-filled, drama-filled, conflict-filled. You have to engage in certain behaviors. Management doesn't respond generally to inspiration or enthusiasm or warmth of spirit, although I'm all for those things in the right measure. What it responds to is discipline. It responds to engaging in certain behaviors or over a long period of time with to provide your directs, the people who work for you, certainty about the kind of character you have and about what behavior they can expect from you. Sorry, that was a pretty long answer.
No, I think that was great because I think you touched on it. You took, throughout your career and your, owning and operating your own business and then going into Manager Tools, you guys identified, the Pareto principle of, hey, management behaviors in order to figure out what managers need to do and how they can be most effective and focus on those things, and you'll see the performance gains just from doing those things. And
you hit it, Pareto. I mean, it infects everything, right?
Yes.
And we got lucky 25 plus years ago. I learned this stuff and said, okay, we're going to teach that stuff and we're going to make it palatable. And here we are.
Oh, that's great. Thank you for sharing that. Now, one of the things I know is the Manager Tools teams operates 100% virtually, and now that we're in this new way of working, doing business, offices have opened in some instances, some have not.
Yep.
What advice would you offer to managers dealing, even small business owners dealing with this type of shift that are a little adverse to managing in this kind of atmosphere?
My advice is you're doomed. Look, managing is hard for most people. And by the way, the powers that be, the zeitgeist around management has really hampered management by suggesting that management is the one system, and it is a system, let's be honest. Right. I don't mean to be disrespectful to humans in general, but it meets all the criteria for system. Management is the one system that that we say, oh, it's just your personality. Go do what you want to do. I mean, think about it. Think about the CFO of your company deciding you're going to use a new accounting software, right? You're going to go to, you're going to do Oracle, or you're going to do Salesforce or whatever. And the CFO asks the CEO approves it, they roll it out, it comes down from the EVPs to the SVPs to the VPs to the senior directors to the junior directors, the senior managers, finally gets to you. And you say to your boss, yeah, I don't like that software, I'm going to keep you. So, I mean, people would think you'd grown two heads, and by the way, you wouldn't be long for this world, at least professionally. and yet, somehow, when it comes to management, it's totally okay. My boss does it a certain way. The company's way is a certain way, but no, I get to do what I want to do. I'm sorry. Now, look, we want you to be authentic, but authentic is not an excuse to do whatever you want to do. There are some things that you have to do. So we've already set people up to believe that management is whoever you want to be. Be your authentic self. By the way, when people tell me they want to be authentic, I say, yeah, I'm sorry, I'm not interested, because your authentic self is yourself away from work. But when you join an organization, there is a subordination you have to go through. It's not a lot. It's not 80%. You don't have to become a corporate clone. We want your best, but we want your best in a framework that is designed to help the company achieve its noble social purpose of serving society. And the vast majority of companies are trying to do that. And so when you come to work and you're a manager, this idea that you can just be yourself is misleading. It's harmful for young managers. And pretty soon, if you're pretty clever and you work really, really hard and say family first, but then put work first, maybe you can get promoted a couple of times. And by then you've learned, okay, everything I thought before was wrong. But regardless, you then put the governmental lockdowns in place due to COVID, and you have a whole nother kettle of fish. There is a famous thing, your listeners can Google it, called the Allen curve. It's named after an MIT professor who discovered that the distance you are from your manager is the single biggest effector of the likelihood of your communication with him or her. Mm-hmm. And the number at which you essentially are at zero, it's asymptotically approaching zero, as you might imagine. The number at which you are at zero is 60 meters. Dude, if you're on the different floor of the same building, you're doomed. Right. You might as well assume anybody on a different floor than you in your company who works for you is in another zip code entirely. Now, don't take my word for it. Go look at the data. There's piles of data, and it's been replicated. People say, "Oh, Alan did it before cell phones." Yeah, okay, check the data. The data's the same, and that's partly because we're human. So it was already hard enough to manage when we were sitting, hopefully co-located, and now suddenly you're far away, maybe a mile or maybe 10 miles. It doesn't matter. Literally, once you get past about 60 meters, let's give people a generosity and say it's 75 meters. Again, different zip code, different area code, different continent, different time zone. Mm-hmm. So it is harder. You have to work more. The single most frequent behavior that professionals engage in at work is communication. You have just taken away the most rich form of communication people have. Now, look, I've said before, I'll say it again, I'll keep saying it. I'm not a people person, but I know the numbers. I know what a difference it makes to be co-located with somebody else. I've seen it. In fact, we have data on it about the difference between a manager's effectiveness. We've compared managers who are distant versus managers who are local, and then we have different data for one-on-ones that are on the phone versus one-on-ones that are on video and in both locations. And it's not even close. Face-to-face one-on-ones outperform everything else. And to be clear, I don't mean that the one-on-one outperforms. I mean the managers who engage in those behaviors get better results and higher retention than anybody else. So it's harder. You have to push more. And unfortunately, because technology has become such a huge part of our lives, and those of us who are older, Michael, I don't think you're old enough to remember this, but 15 years ago, if we'd had this pandemic, it would have been very different.
Oh, yes.
No cell phones, really. No, I mean, 15 years ago, 1990. Well, no, that would have been 2005.
Yeah.
Maybe 20 years ago in 2000. Everyone seems to forget. I mean, once we get a new incremental improvement in our lives, the infrastructure of our lives, like cell phones or apps or whatever, or Zoom, they almost forget that it didn't exist 6 months or a year ago, and they have trouble remembering what things would have been like. So technology is fantastic. We live in an incredible time, but there is no replacement for that face-to-face. Close if you go video, but one of the downsides of technology, email, is that many managers, about half the managers in the world, based on our data, prefer email to face-to-face. The other half prefer face-to-face, and so they think I can maintain a relationship with my people predominantly through email because, of course, we're distant and we're not seeing one another. We have data on that too. It's literally disastrous. I mean, it's a car wreck in slow motion with other cars, and the manager tells himself, "Well, that's what I have is I have email," and he's literally avoiding the data and probably his gut to some degree as well. So yes, managing remotely is brutally hard. I mean, not you don't feel brutalized. It's just really hard.
Right.
There are some things you can do though. Okay. First of all, you've got to have video one-on-ones. Apparently, the single fastest learning event in the history of mankind was in the month of March. Between March 15th and April 15th, everyone learned Zoom.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Now, look, I'm not particularly Zoom, I'm not biased. I like Skype. I like Google Hangout. I like FaceTime. I like MS Teams, although I did make the mistake. I made these two mistakes in the last year. I told a group at Microsoft, who's a client of ours, and I said to them, you could use FaceTime, and they booed. I mean, they booed. When I told the Apple guys, hey, you can use FaceTime or you can use Teams or whatever.
Ouch.
Or Skype, they were like, no, yeah. They kind of chuckled, like, yeah, we wouldn't do that. So the platform doesn't matter, but you have to be able to. We recommend you see the face of the other person. Now, look, people are working from home. It's their home. I don't know if you've heard, but everyone has been saying for years, as we continue to work longer hours thanks to technology enablement, people have been saying family first, family first, family first. And I know I've been saying they say that.
Yes.
But if you're going to say family first, then you really do have to appreciate some people. Most managers overestimate the likelihood that their directs are just like them, and so they assume they have a spouse or a partner and two kids and a house in the suburbs and so on, and that's not the case. And you're now going to their home is what you're doing when you're talking to somebody for a video one-on-one. And that means some respect for dog noise and kid interruptions and trips because the washer needs to be moved to the dryer. Those are all normal things. And I think this will continue, at least some companies will continue it for a very, very long time. I think probably by Q2 of 2021, there will be researchers showing the impact of virtual life. And I think actually the journal just had an article already saying, yeah, this isn't as great as we thought, right. Because finishing projects is harder. So a couple of recommendations. You've got to do video one-on-ones. You got to do them weekly. You got to schedule them with your people. It's okay if you move them around. That's fine. But you got to schedule them so your directs know, I commit to you that I'm going to talk to you every week about things that are important to you. You have to let your direct go first. You've got to take notes. We have science out the, unbelievable amounts of science proving that those are the non-negotiables of effective one-on-ones. You take away any one of those, you start losing effectiveness. And then I would recommend some other stuff. I happen to think the single best management technology improvement in the last 25 years is Scrum, Agile. And interesting that the worst managed organizations in the history of mankind for the last 50 years, certainly since IT existed, is IT, and they come up with the single biggest improvement in management, the idea of daily stand-ups. I would recommend a daily stand-up for many, many managers on Skype, on Zoom, on Google Hangouts, whatever. Actually, it's not called Google Hangouts anymore, whatever it's called. And then I also recommend, we have some data which suggests that office hours, with the equivalent of a professor providing office hours, half an hour every day, where you say, look, I will be at my desk, I promise, and you can ring me. I'll have my headset on. You can ring me on Skype or Zoom or whatever, and we can talk by video. Now, what managers will tell us when we say this is, I don't have time. And you know what? They're right. But we've had a guarantee regarding all of our guidance for 15 years, and I had it for many years before that, which is we guarantee if you do it our way, you will get more time back than you spend. The big problem with managers and professionals in general right now, in my experience, is inefficiency. And they don't have time because they're busy doing a whole bunch of stuff they shouldn't do. Primary among them is email. Mm-hmm. Look, I love email. Don't get me wrong. It's incredibly powerful, but it has to be managed. And too many people are spending all their time in email anxiety, and there are solutions to that. There's another long answer, Michael. I'm sorry.
Oh, no problem. I think all of it's great and helps everybody kind of understand that. As we shift, there's no one right answer for any of this. We're all working through it, but having some set of tools, or at least having some sort of direction about it, helps. Because I know when you were talking about the Allen curve, previously when I was previously employed by a company, I was managing people remotely, and I always wondered how, I was basically a subscriber to the Management Trinity, going to the conferences and things, and following the process. But it was always hard because I had people that were in other offices, different time zones, and technically, in the same continent but in a different country, and it's a challenge. And you magnify that in this type of environment where, like you said, where dogs, start barking randomly during the middle of a conversation, and it is hard, and people don't. Sometimes they take it personally and make themselves feel uncomfortable because it's like, oh, my life is happening, but allowing yourself to realize that life is happening, and it's okay.
It's okay.
Laugh it off.
And you know what, Michael? If they trust you, because you have already been doing that, they'll be okay with it. They'll understand. They will know that you understand.
Yes.
I completely agree with you. And it's no question it's harder. You mentioned that we're virtual. We've always been virtual.
Yes.
I live in Pebble Beach. Mike has a couple of homes, one in California, one in Northern Virginia. We have people in Texas and Canada, in South Carolina. And we just take it for granted, and people would say to us, Mark, you don't understand how hard it is. What are you talking about? I've been doing this for 15 years. In fact, I was doing it for probably 5 years before that. Right. It's hard work. But I would also argue that while we give specific recommendations, and we do have a whole series of guidance, when you come to our homepage of our website, managertools.com, the first thing you see is a whole bunch of COVID-19 and remote management recommendations. And all of our courses now, Effective Manager, Effective Communicator, Effective Hiring Manager, all of them are virtual, and all of them address the issues of communication, the issues of managing, and the issues of hiring, learning how to hire people effectively, having to do it remotely. No question about it. It's harder. Yeah.
Okay. So you talked about some of the different conferences, some of the different conferences that you guys do put on. I've gone to the Effective Manager twice. I've been to the Effective Communicator, and there's a highly interactive nature to them. Making that transition, how are you guys able to do that in a virtual environment? Because I know it's a little bit more challenging when it's not just one-on-one.
Yeah, magic. Smoke and mirrors. No, it's much harder. So,
Okay.
for instance, let me give you an example. So, first of all, the Effective Manager Conference, instead of being one day, is now, I think, 4 sessions over a period of weeks. Oh, wow. It's a couple of hours at a time. And the reason for that is because people aren't good video-wise past about 4 hours, and I would argue even less than that.
Yes.
But I think our Effective Communicator Conference is 4 hours long. And I think we may have a break in there. But so one-on-ones, we never practiced at a live conference because you can't practice one-on-ones. Feedback, the feedback model, which addresses talking to your people about performance, we actually go through all of the practice scenarios. We call on people and we say, okay, I've just walked you through the model. Give me that feedback. And then generally we try to find things that they did good, and then we pick on somebody else. And so everybody gets multiple chances to practice the effective feedback model. When it comes to coaching, same thing. We walk everybody through the model. We tell them the steps. We give them an example, and then we have 2 more examples where we say, okay, let's pretend that you guys are all one big hive mind. Let's do the first step. We got to set a goal. What's our deadline? What's our behavior? What's our quality? The next step is brainstorming. Let's brainstorm, and so on. So we go through examples, and we ask them to take notes and to interact. Same thing, Effective Hiring Manager. You're going to see videos of interviews, and you're going to have to interject and ask questions, and essentially stop the video, much like we do in person. It is now. Look, we're doing everything we can, and it is not the same. Right. Because I believe in it, because I wouldn't compare this to an actual event, live event, because nobody's having actual live events. But compared to other trainings, I love really good training. And most training is not good. Most training is the presenter talking.
Yes. Understand. So you talked when we kind of went through the conversation about some of the different conferences you guys have. Do you guys foresee doing a live or even a virtual conference for the productive professional based on the career tools guidance that you provide?
So no, we've never. Okay, we've talked about that. Obviously, we get that question probably a few times a year. It's so the problem we have with that is one of scale versus customer. If you're a manager, I think our Effective Manager Conference is a little over $1,000. Majority of the time, that's paid for by the client, by your company. We're an external training resource, and we have, up until this year, we have 80 or 90 of them all over the world, largely in the U.S. though. We do provide a personal. If you want to pay for yourself, if your company won't do it, there's a discount. I think it's $300. We give you a $300 discount so that individuals who want to learn, who've gotten hooked on the podcast, some of them just want to come and meet me, and unfortunately, I don't generally do those anymore. I don't encourage them wanting to meet me, but the problem is, I'm not sure there's a market. Now, I could be wrong, Michael. In fact, because you've mentioned it, I'll throw it out to our group on Friday morning in our operations call and say, should we be looking at this? I don't think the average company, I don't even think unaverage companies could be convinced to spend $1,000 for basic professional skills. Now, I'll go a step further. They would say, well, no, we don't need to pay you to do that. We'll do it. And then, of course, they immediately abdicate the responsibility, and no one does that. Right. So, no, I don't think so. Now, we do have resources available on the website, and we license our work so that you can download, you can get all of our show notes, and you can get our interviewing series and our resume workbook and those kinds of career management skill things and so on. But no, we've never done that. In the next 10 years, I'm going to retire. I'm 60 years old. And maybe my successors will do that. I don't know.
Okay. Well, I figured, with all these different transitions that we're going through, it may have been on the roadmap and something that people can look forward to, because we are in a different time, in a different place right now. So it's one of those questions. But as an organization right now, what's one of the biggest challenges you guys are facing as a team, and how are you dealing with it?
I'm sorry. It's the same challenge everybody else faces, but nobody seems to want to talk about it. Sometimes I feel like I'm the only guy with one head. Revenue. That's the problem. Revenue. Look, it's funny, Michael. It has become popular in today's world to decry a company getting bigger or too big. This company's too big, that company's too big. That's a really sad thing for modern capitalistic democracies. It's another sad thing to think that democracy is somehow bad. Capitalistic democracy is the single greatest form of engine for the transformation of the world. Everybody's richer, taller, smarter, healthier, safer than we've ever been, and it will continue that way for the next 100 years, and someday communism will go away because it's offensive to the freedom and the spirit of every human being. When you become an organization, one of the great beauties of society that people don't understand is organizations are formed, people agreeing to come together to serve society. That's why organizations exist, to sell or provide a product or service to help someone else have a better life. It's as simple as that. And if I'm trying to sell you something, it has to make sense to you. You have to believe that what you're paying me for gives you a better return even than I'm getting. Right. This is not a bad thing. The fact that it's capitalistic is only a function of the fact that capitalism is not a system. Okay? Socialism, communism, those are systems with economic impacts. Capitalism is not a system. It is an incredibly large number of small transactions that you can analyze from afar, but you cannot influence greatly because it relies on individual freedom. When we join an organization, I mentioned before, you give up a little bit of your freedom. For instance, you don't have free speech in a company. You don't. Google just learned that, by the way. They allowed free speech, and boy, was it a mess, and they shut it down. And we've known that for a couple of 100 years in the management circle. But you give up. You pay a tax to the company for the benefit of the company, massively magnifying human ability, capacity, and potential. Think about it. 100,000 individuals, maybe it's 125,000, the number of people who work at Apple. 100,000 individuals working independently. Do we believe they really could produce iPhones and iPads? No way. Never going to happen in a billion years. And in fact, society or sociologists will tell you the single greatest achievement of mankind is large organizations. Okay. So we're an organization that is trying to serve the world, and the primary marker of that is revenue, and we count revenue because it's not bad to be more profitable, because that profit, provided it's used wisely, can be put back into the company so the company can invest and serve yet more people, assuming that there are more people who would benefit from a free exchange of revenue or cash for the service or product the company provides. It's a very ethical thing that organizations do. And we are engaged in an ethical situation. But full disclosure, so we're a small company. We only have 10 people, but we have basically 3 lines of business. We have our public conferences, which are about a third of our business. We have client work where clients, often managers who started listening to us, came to a public conference, got promoted 3 times, now have budget to train their entire organization, hire us to come in and train all of their managers. So we have public conferences, we have client conferences, and you name the company, we've been there. And then we also have licensing. Well, the first 2, of course, at least for a couple of months, those were events. They went away. And so 2/3 of our revenue gone overnight. Now, look, one of the reasons a lot of profit isn't a bad thing is you don't have to spend the profit. And in fact, in our case, we had $1 million in the bank just for this occurrence. Everybody talks about profit, but really cash is king in the business world. And unfortunately, as I'm sure you read, a lot of business press saying small companies had 2 weeks worth of operating cash, which just would scare me to death. If I employed other people and suddenly I only had a 2-week cushion, I would lose my mind. I couldn't ethically ask you, Michael, to come join us and say, oh, by the way, if for some reason there's a bit of a blip, if the internet goes down, if Google stops working, whatever it is, if we can't survive for 2 weeks, and then suddenly I have to mortgage my house, which, by the way, is not paid for, so I don't think I can mortgage it again. And so the issue for us is revenue. That's the biggest challenge. Now, look, we are very hard to get hired by. I spent a few years as a recruiter. Most people think of me as the guy who talks about one-on-ones and feedback and so on, but actually I've spent much more time teaching hiring. In fact, I've taught interviewing techniques. You name the organization in America and even in Europe, including the FBI and the CIA, we've taught interviewing techniques too, and the White House and all kinds of other places. And we're very hard to get hired by. And the reason why is because everyone who works here, if they need a kidney, I'll give it to them. And we're not going to mess around. We're going to be absolutely, if I think you're not exactly right, you're not getting in. Right. On the other hand, once you're in, I'll give you anything you need. Whatever you need, I'll do. So we're very fortunate in that Mike and I feel a deep sense of love and trust for our people. And by God, we will keep it that way. Okay. You know, it sounds corny. I'm not suggesting I'm anything that special, but we pledge our lives and our sacred honor to our people on our team. What that means is we had a lot of cash, and the reason we had a lot of cash was because we knew stuff like this could happen. Somebody get hit by a bus, whatever. And so we're good for the next year or more, but I could tell you exactly when our cash will run out. And so we have to come up with other revenue to make up for the revenue loss. So, you know, in crisis, you get creative. What do? We created virtual versions of all 3 of our public events. We also strengthened the offering we had for our licenses, which individuals can pay $200 a year and get access to all of our show notes for everything, the entire 1,200, 1,500 cast archive of all of our shows, 15 years, every single week, never missed a week. And it includes our interviewing series, which we would normally sell at $150, but now it's part of the license, and the resume workbook also included, and that's $200 a year. And we've gotten creative, and it's almost embarrassing to admit it that we weren't creative before, but that's the nature of creativity. So yeah, the challenge is revenue. Now, I'm not worried. First of all, worry is like a rocking chair. It gives you something to do, but doesn't get you anywhere. So I don't worry. I'm not predisposed to be a worrying person. But as the leader with Mike of the firm, I'm certainly keenly aware of our responsibility to manage our company. There's no pay cuts, no anything for anybody. Basically, we're burning cash right now, but we believe the reasonable extrapolation that we will be completely fine. And we need to come up with more revenue. We're going to put out a couple of more books this year. Now, one of the funny things about the publishing industry, Michael, is that if we sign a book deal, let's assume there's only a small advance, $20,000, $30,000, $50,000.
Right.
If we sign a book deal and my book goes on sale in September, I won't get my first check until in like May of 2022.
Oh, wow.
It's a very arcane, weird system. And so we're probably, the next couple of books are going to be self-published,
Okay.
digital versions. There's no physical cost. We might still do some physical books for special guests and so on, but generally that's the plan.
Oh, wow. You guys, like I said, I've been following Manager Tools for years, and I think the training, the guidance is always practical, I guess, is probably the simplest way to say it. And just talking with you and having this conversation, it's, you share that, you sound like, sometimes you were talking, I remember listening to podcasts and I'm like, hey, I'm actually talking to the very guy that I heard for multiple times over and over in my head. But it kind of goes to show that the going back to the basics of things are the things that are going to help you be successful, even in dealing with the challenges, how you talked about, not necessarily saying you weren't creative before, but, the need for more creativity was heightened by the lockdown and COVID and all of these different things. So
I would even go further than that, dude. The way I would describe it is, if you don't have a go-to set of skills and behaviors, and I would argue that most managers don't.
Mm-hmm.
Just take, for example, email. People are doing email all throughout the day. That's a horrible approach to a fundamental part of your job. The idea that you would fill it into the interstitial spaces in your day it's literally like, oh, it's an afterthought, but it's really important. You can't have important afterthoughts. It doesn't work that way. Right. So if you don't have some fundamental tools that you can recur to and feel confident about that, then everything is in turmoil. If you weren't doing one-on-ones and now your people are distanced, you don't have a great relationship with them, and now you're trying to start one-on-ones, but you're starting from a trust deficit, you're in trouble at a time when the company needs you to be creative and on and focused and delivering and so on. So having a base set of skills that you can rely on, that's rote in a way. I don't think about my one-on-ones. They just happen. They're scheduled, and maybe we have to move them. But that gives me time every week to do that. And that frees me up to do other things, like be creative about products and services in order to create new revenue streams. Yeah.
Yeah, I really do appreciate you joining us today and sharing, again, some even more practical guidance for people that are facing this, managing teams remotely, dealing with a small business, and figuring out the next steps for their business and overcoming those obstacles and challenges. So again, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate everything you joining us today. If you want to get more information about Mark and Manager Tools, please, you can go to manager-tools.com. And he is the author of The Effective Manager and The Effective Hiring Manager books. I believe both are available on Amazon or directly available from your website as well, correct?
Yeah, or if they want a signed copy,
yes,
God forbid, but if they want a signed copy, they can get those from us. But yeah, the place to get them is Amazon, or hopefully your local bookstore has it. And if your local bookstore has it, you should buy it there.
Okay. All righty. Thank you again, Marcus. I appreciate the time today, and you have a great day.
My pleasure, Michael.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching this week's video. I hope you were able to find one thing you can begin to apply to your life today. I would appreciate it if you would like, comment, and subscribe. Also, if you have any feedback, leave it in the comments below. Let us know if you know of any great guests to be on the spotlight. I look forward to your questions and your comments. Thanks again for watching.